this is something haram. Yet these people will come and twist it to aid their government, to aid the people and to aid the kuffar, and say this is something bid-durura. Out of necessity we've allowed this action to be done. Likewise we find su khutut at-ta'lim, that the way that we study things is very bad. If you look at most of the Muslim countries, their structure on teaching people, on educating people, is something that's written in the 18th centuries. Even the Islamic institutes, that many of their books talk about philosophy in the beginning of the 18th century, and they expect you to memorize these books of mantiq. That when you leave the institute, you should have memorized this book and memorized the explanation of it as well. And what does this benefit you? You go out in the real world, and how many people do you meet who debate with you on a philosophical level or upon logic? Hardly anybody. But they are told to memorize these text after text and just memorize them for the sake of gaining this qualification. Likewise we find da'ful himam wal azaim, a weakness within ourselves. That's why you find many scholars have written current day books about ulul himma, a strong desire, strong aspiration to gain what you want to gain. Look at some of these kuffar, some of these disbelievers. They'll go through all extents to gain what they want to gain. They have to sacrifice everything, they will go to it. And we find the Muslim ummah is forever has this weakness within themselves that they never ever gain what they really want to gain. Likewise we find infitah ad-dunya, the opening of this dunya. That we find many people that the dunya just taken them over. That is the only interest that they are worried about, not to seek al-ilm or to seek knowledge. And we find that whoever goes running to the dunya, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will place poverty in between his forehead. And whoever seeks al-ilm or seeks to get close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then the dunya will chase him. The dunya will chase that individual rather than the person chasing the dunya. Likewise we find kathratu wasa'il at-tarfi wal-lahu, wasting time. In many of our affairs that we see, that the Muslims are forever wasting their time in play and amusement and things that don't benefit them in any way. It doesn't benefit them at all. If you're ignorant of it, it's not going to harm you. And you have knowledge of it, it's not going to benefit you. Names of certain teams, certain activities, certain sports. And if you are ignorant, it is not going to harm you. And if you have knowledge of it, it's not going to benefit you, as many of the ulama write about such things. And likewise we find at-tukhassasat al-juz'iyya, that many scholars today are only specialized in certain things. So if you go to him, he'll only know about usul al-fiqh, or about tafsir, or about aqidah. No one will be a sheikh in the meaning of he'll understand all of the sciences. Everything has become split up now, that even the universities tell you to only specialize in one thing. They specialize in nahu, in grammar, and that's it. Don't specialize in anything else. So what does this create? People who are separate people just specializing in one topic. So when they return back to their people, they cannot really benefit anyone. An alim is one who has covered many of the subjects and has a good comprehension of al-Islam. And likewise we find, this is something which has been decreed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's something which has been decreed, as we find in the hadith of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and Anas radiyallahu an qala Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, inna min ashrati as-sa'a, that verily from the signs of the last day, and yurfa' al-ilm, that knowledge will be lifted, wa yuthbat al-jahl wa yushrab al-khamr wa yadhhar al-zina, that people will begin to drink intoxications, zina will become apparent, widespread, and we find that jahl, ignorance, will be established. And then the ulama have mentioned, or another hadith mentions, and yurfa' al-ilm. What does it mean that knowledge will be lifted? And knowledge will be lifted by the death of the ulama. The ulama will be lifted, and other people will come and they will give religious verdicts. فَأَفْتَوْا بِغَيْرِ عِلْمٍ فَضَلُّوا وَأَضَلُّوا, then they will be misguided and they will misguide other people. This will happen, that the true ulama will be lifted, and these false ulama will come, ulama as-su, evil ulama, or ulama al-dawla. If you read some of the books, they call them scholars of the government. This is what it really means, scholars of the government, who give fatwa not just to aid the government but change the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And these are the people who are misguided, and they will guide other people as well. And we find that this knowledge, which has been continuously mentioned inside the Quran, is the knowledge of al-Islam. Because many people, they like to say that when the word ilm is mentioned, it means any science, it means any knowledge. It could be the dunya, could be about agriculture, could be about science, anything. This is something beneficial. This is what it refers to. This is incorrect. The real knowledge which benefits, or the real knowledge which, when ilm is mentioned inside the Quran and the Sunnah, is the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاءِ. Those people who fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are the scholars. You can't study engineering and aeronautics and this will make you recognize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His names and His attributes, which will bring you closer to Him. So this is the knowledge that we find that's been laid down inside the Quran. And likewise we find the preference of those people who know and those people who don't know. قُلْ هَلْ يَسْتَوِي الَّذِينَ يَعْلَمُونَ وَالَّذِينَ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ إِنَّمَا يَتَذَكَّرُ أُولُو الْأَلْبَابِ. Say, are those people equal, those who know and those who do not know? إِنَّمَا يَتَذَكَّرُ أُولُو الْأَلْبَابِ. And only those men of understanding comprehend this, or take a reminder from this. And ulul albab, and lub is the intellect, is the mind, the ability to understand something and to comprehend something. So here we find that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying clearly, those people who know and those people who don't know are not the same in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In another place in the Quran we find, يَرْفَعُ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مِنْكُمْ وَالَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْعِلْمَ دَرَجَاتٍ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will raise certain people amongst you in ranks. Certain believers, He'll raise them in ranks. And those people who've been given knowledge, those are the ones that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will raise up in rank. So this shows the distinction of the person who is searching for knowledge or coming closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and those people who are not. And we find that as for those people who feel that the dunya is something, a good form of knowledge, this is fardul kifaya. This is only that a small group of people have to go and seek this knowledge and to benefit the society, whether it be affairs of agriculture and other such knowledge benefits society in general. Then a certain group of people have to go and search this knowledge. This is not the knowledge which is fardul ayn. This is not the knowledge which is an obligation upon an individual to do. If somebody amongst you in this room goes and does that knowledge, then that comes back and benefits us, that is enough. But it's a knowledge that we all need to go and do. And that is the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we find that even some of the ulama, they write that even the people who do these mundane affairs, even the farmer, a mu'min farmer, his link with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is very close. Because he sees the seed growing out of the ground. So he sees the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that increases his iman in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And yet we find that so many times that we could be comprehending so many things, reading so many things, but yet we don't gain that closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that this farmer, this mundane affair of just planting a seed in the ground, that when he sees it growing, he reflects upon the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why we find in the Quran, إِنَّ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَاخْتِلَافِ اللَّيْلِ وَالنَّهَارِ لَآيَاتٍ لِأُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ. Once again, in the alternation of the night and the day, and the creation of the heavens and the earth, is a sign once again for people, ulul albab, men of understanding. الَّذِينَ يَذْكُرُونَ اللَّهَ قِيَامًا وَقُعُودًا وَعَلَى جُنُوبِهِمْ وَيَتَفَكَّرُونَ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ رَبَّنَا مَا خَلَقْتَ هَذَا بَاطِلًا سُبْحَانَكَ فَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. Who see this creation, all of this, and they say, oh Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you've not created this in vain. None of this has been created in vain. Subhanak faqina adab an-nar. Glorified are you. Save us from the punishment of the fire. Those people are remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala standing, sitting down and lying down. This is like even mundane person would reflect on some of these signs and get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why we find that many of the ulama, as Imam Bukhari in his collection of Sahih, he mentions that al-ilm qabla al-qawl wal-amal. To have knowledge before you carry out any actions. Any action that you carry out, you need to have knowledge of that. And that is exactly what the Quran says as well. فَعْلَمْ أَنَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. Have knowledge that none has the right to be worshipped except for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is not a deen, a religion or a way of life that you just take anything upon its acceptance. It is about affirmation. فَعْلَمْ, have knowledge, have certainty that none has the right to be worshipped except for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So here we find that the first knowledge that the mu'min needs to strive for is the knowledge of Tawheed. Is to seek the names and attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Seek the ways to get closer to Him, what worship you need to do. Read about the lordship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the creation, the names and the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why we find that when the word comes of comprehension once again of ilm, مَنْ يُرِدِ اللَّهُ بِهِ خَيْرًا يُفَقِّهُ فِي الدِّينِ. Whoever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to show goodness to, He gives him the understanding of the deen. Gives him the understanding of the deen. That is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala showing goodness to an individual, that they are able to comprehend the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we find that in the general sense we find words in such a hadith, for example, طَلَبُ الْعِلْمِ فَرِيدَةٌ عَلَى كُلِّ مُسْلِمٍ مَا رَوَاهُ ابن ماجه. That to search for knowledge is an obligation upon every single Muslim. As for some people who say one Muslimah and upon every female Muslim woman as well, then this is an incorrect addition. Because in the Arabic language when you say Muslim, it means both male and female. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, or you who believe, means both male and female, the gender. And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to be specific, then He will talk about the females. Wal muslimina wal muslimat, the believing men and the believing women. Was sa'imina was sa'imat, the fasting men and the fasting women. To be specific in referring to the male gender and the female gender. As for the hadith that many people they quote, utlubul ilma walau bis-sin, and you seek knowledge even if you have to go to China. This is a fabrication. That this hadith is a fabrication. Maybe to some extent that the meaning could be true, to go out and seek knowledge wherever you have to travel. And that's why some words have been mentioned about Imam Shafi'i, that go out out in the land of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because there are 5 benefits in going out in the land of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One of them is the seeking or the quest of knowledge. So all of these, likewise the hadith that some people like to mention, I'm the city of knowledge and Ali is its gate. This is also a fabricated hadith as well. I am the house of wisdom and Ali is its door. This is also a fabrication as well. So a person should have knowledge of this, because